I grew up during the Cold War era, right? This was a basically non-weaponry war between the United States and the USSR. And if you're an old person, you remember all this. And one of the things about the Cold War is that it was a time when, as the whole of America, if TV means anything, and it does, we were all a little bit queued up for spies, like TV shows like The Man from U.N.C.L.E. You got to be old to remember that, but yeah, if you are old, I'll bet you just had a flashback. Secret Agent. We had all the James Bond movies. Spies were the thing. Secret agents. Well, the work of a spy has to be conducted under the radar. It has to be conducted more or less secretively. They have to slip in. They have to kind of work their way underground. I have a good friend who, although he didn't spy for any country, I don't suppose he was actually a spy. He was more of a smuggler. And he wasn't even a really secretive smuggler. My friend Willard Black used to, some people would say smuggle. I think he would say he used to take Bibles across from the free West to communist Eastern Europe. I'd love to hear him tell stories about his border crossings. One of the stories I remember is him telling that he discovered the best place to put the Bibles, of course, was in his luggage. And if he would put a carton of Marlboro cigarettes and a few bars of Lifebuoy soap on top of all of the Bibles in his suitcase, the border guards, that was an acceptable bribe because they couldn't get either one of those things in their countries, and so they would pass him through. The whole idea of under the radar, just, a little bit of sliding in, slipping in. Well, Jude talks about that, but he doesn't talk about it in a positive light. He says that he decided, at first, he wanted to talk about the salvation that we all share, right? But then he said, I felt compelled that I had to write and urge you to contend for the faith once for all entrusted to God's holy people. And here's why. Because certain individuals whose condemnation was written about long ago have secretly slipped in among you. It's almost the secret agent thing. It's almost the spy thing. Then he describes them. We talked about this first piece of the description last time. They are ungodly people. And then he says, who pervert the grace of our God into a license for immorality. Now, you got to think about that. The grace of God says there's nothing that you can do that will make him not love you. You can't, his love will never lessen because of anything you can do. And the other side of that coin is you can't be better and make him love you more. His love is what it is. And because of his love, his agape love, he gives us what we do not and could not deserve. And that is his love. Excuse me. Which, in my opinion, It's the source, it's the headwaters, it's the fountain out of which every blessing from God flows. The grace. I've already told you it's my favorite concept in the entire Bible. And I hope I never get finished unpacking what it is, what it looks like, what it means in my life. And I believe my life will be a constant journey toward expressing His grace more fully, more consistently, moment by moment, to everyone, including myself. There is a huge risk that God takes by giving His grace to us. And the risk is that it will be taken and misused, as these people misused it. Jude writes, they pervert the grace of our God. To pervert means you don't improve. Perversion never improves anything. It only destroys the value, especially the purity. To pervert means that error, untruth becomes a part of the package. To pervert means to bend it, often to break, but always to bend. And this is important. Every person has got to somehow learn that bent truth is no longer truth. And when you bend grace, it's no longer grace. It's something else. And John identifies the something else. He says they have perverted the grace of our God into a license for immorality. In other words, instead of the grace of God saying you can't do anything to pull you out from under God's love, what it says is you can do anything you want to, including things that you've always heard are immoral or wrong. Now, I don't want to be one of those old guys screaming, "Get off my lawn," but I have to say, this seems to me a pretty good description of American culture today. And it's not just America, but it is America, where right is called wrong and wrong is called right. And if you've missed all this, it's because you've not been on social media. Good for you. And you haven't watched all the newscasts. Good for you. You haven't been reading the newspaper. Good for you. But our culture as a whole is doing whatever they want to do and calling it A-OK. In fact, there are folks, there are individuals, there are groups that are doing immoral things, and they are identifying those things as moral. I mean, they've got a moral justification. It burns my buns. I get angry when I think about it. I have to be really careful when I go through my Twitter and Facebook feeds, because there's a whole lot of that gets exposed and spewed on those platforms. So I have to be careful, because if I'm not careful, that will hold my mind hostage. Well, long before any social media existed, Jude said, there are people. They are not innocent people. They are not merely misguided. The term for these people is ungodly. And one of the things that these ungodly people do is that they pervert the grace of God, and they turn it into a license for immorality. There is a word that's used in the Bible. It's rarely used in our conversation. for this. It's called licentious. What it means is no rules, or the rules don't apply. And more likely, the rules don't apply to me, to this situation, to us. This is a very, very dangerous way to live. Our world is set up by its creator so that you reap what you sow. This is a world of consequences. Duh. All of us know that. I mean, that's part of what, if you grow up at all, you figure out, there are consequences. When I do good things, I usually get good consequences. When I do wrong things, I get bad consequences. Is that hard? Doesn't seem hard to me. But our world seems to have not gotten the memo. Oh, no. It got the memo. It just disregarded it. Now, I'm not talking about any one particular political party. Whichever party you're a part of, you're looking at the other and thinking, well, that's them. Now, I'm not thinking about a denomination, because there are broken people in every organized group has broken people in it. And I almost said honestly. Trying to weed that out, as you know. Here's the deal, though. Broken people are everywhere. Now, the grace of God wouldn't be needed if there weren't broken people everywhere. Right? But there are people whose brokenness leads them to this incredible, I think it's not just a disregard for, it's like this, it's an affront, it's an assault, it's an insult to God to take His grace and pervert it, to bend it, to make it something it was never meant to be. One of my heroes, and I don't agree with everything that he said, wrote, thought, taught, but his example is incredible. And his books, although you better have your adulting britches on, and you might even want to have a dictionary handy, because he writes pretty deep stuff, or he did. His name is Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He's a German Lutheran pastor during World War II who was a part of a scheme, a plan, a plot to assassinate Adolf Hitler. He was out on the edges, but he was undeniably a part of the plot. He was arrested by the Nazis, and he was imprisoned and executed just days before the Allies liberated Berlin. But one of the landmark books that he wrote is titled The Cost of Discipleship. I love in the introduction what one of his sentences is: when Jesus calls a man, He bids him come and die. I don't know whether he had this premonition that he would be an example of this fact. But one of the phrases, one of the terms that he invented was cheap grace. When we cheapen God's grace by making it possible for us to intentionally disregard His design. These are my words, not his, but that essentially is what this cheap grace was. When we cheapen God's grace, we disregard and insult the cost of God's grace. Now, I can throw rocks at others, but I've got to look in the mirror. And I challenge you to do the same. Do we do that? Pick this up again next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.